Everyone, and welcome to Geopolitics with Tyberius D. Before we hit that intro, just got to let you know, this is going to be a different conversation tonight. We're going to be talking about the possible end of the age of liberalism and how that is going to have ramifications for a very long time. Roll the intro. All right, everyone. So today, you see the topic. You see what's going on. Good to see everyone in the chat. Thank you all for being here. We're going to be talking about more of a concept than we are a nation. And it's been something I've been wanting to do for a while. And it's going to be a little bit of me ranting into the void. But if you guys have any questions, you want to keep me on track in chat, feel free to do so. As it's very, very important. But before we get there, just want to let everyone know the Geopolitics with Tyberius D is brought to you by the wonderful people of Fallenor, Andy Wagner, the West Dude, Julia, Drew, and Samantha. We thank you all so much for your patronage and everything you do for us. And we hope to have a few more names on the list here soon, which it looks like there is going to be one person get added before too long. So can't wait for that. Rolling this back, what is the age of liberalism? Why would it end? All right, so age of liberalism in a nutshell. Largely with the Enlightenment, and it really starts kicking off in the late 1600s, early 1700s, is that you have the idea, or the ideas of individualism, you have the ideas of largely people looking after their own. And that's not in like the selfish manner, although eventually some people will take there, such as Ayn Rand. What it largely is that we had for a long time philosophies and cultures that were built around serving the state, serving the community, serving the religion, serving on the behalf to others. It was very communal or communitarian, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But with the age of the Enlightenment, or at least the way that's how we define it, is that we kind of reject that. And we say, look, who is the most adept at actually looking out after their own interests? The people themselves. Those people are the most adept, right? Because they know what their needs are. They know what their things are, or, their problems are. Let's have them look after it. Self-responsibility, if you, excuse me, the general trend is here is that, people aren't stupid, people aren't bad, people can handle things that are going on in their own very lives. And the more that we empower that person, the more that they can become a productive member in a society. And we don't need these institutions to keep everybody in line, because people will keep themselves largely in line because they will advance their own priorities and prerogatives. Now, I'm sure you can kind of see where there's some problems with that just out of the gate, but that is liberalism in a nutshell. It's the further empowerment and I don't want to say activation, but the empowerment and the acceptance of people to participate in the system as a whole by looking after their own interests. Something I identified very, very much for a very long time. I was a libertarian. I have some rejections of this. We'll get to my own personal opinions on that if you guys want to ask me that. But this is largely empowered by, as I said earlier, the Enlightenment, but also particularly the Industrial Revolution. And there's this really cyclical conversation that has to be had about the social rights empowering the economic rights and the economic rights empowering the social rights. And I'll give you this one, right? As a social right, giving people the right to a free press, the right to assemble, the right to protest, the right to speak, but also the right just to, not be discriminated against, which is really weird. But giving people these opportunities that were usually not given fundamentally changes the conditions of how you operate, but also it empowers you to reflect in numerous different ways, in that if you have the right to speech and assembly, you may also have the right to to unionize, right? You may have the right to actually get together with your workers and say, "Hey, look, this boss here, kind of giving me the shaft." That fundamentally changes how your economics rights have you. And if you have economic rights, such as a good wage, a good standard of living, what have you, that gives you more time and more energy to look after your own social rights. So if you feel like that you're still being discriminated against, or you're not having people in your political corner representing your values, you can go out of your way at that point to have people work on your behalf. And so the whole conversation here is that this is cyclical. And then you kind of get like the modern difference on a nutshell of how you have progressives and you have liberals today, is that the liberals largely work on the social aspect, but not the economic one, because the economic one is one of those deals where you can't control for that. You know, you're going to have poor people, you're going to have middle class people, you're going to have rich people. That's not something you can really help, right? So economic rights aren't much of a concern for traditional liberals. It's the social ones. It's the idea that, you know what, if regardless of if you are black or gay or whatever the hell it is that you need to be treated to a certain to a certain standard. You at minimum have to be treated to this, and if you're not going to get your social rights, and that's a huge deal. And it's one of the reasons I actually really respect liberals, is that while I don't necessarily agree with the ideology in a nutshell, I do really appreciate that mentality. The difference between them and progressives focus not only on the social rights of treating people with a minimum standard, but progressives also look at that as an economic rights as well, is that you have to treat people to an economic standard. You have to give them certain things, or you have to ensure that everyone gets at least X, Y, and Z, which I absolutely thoroughly despise and abhor. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell on that, but also getting down where we are now. So the age of liberalism, to track back where we were going, starts with the Enlightenment, definitely really picks up during the industrial age, because capitalism and private capital and private enterprise really empowers the middle class into becoming a viable social and political force. Because it's one thing when you have, and check out my Industrial Revolutions episode for this, but during the age of agriculture, you largely have landowners and you have the people who work on the land, and it's very, very stratified. You basically have an aristocracy. When this changes to the industrial areas, that you don't just have that. You have laborers and you have people that are on the ground level, but then you have clerks, you have administrators, you have all these things that you need that functionally build out a middle class, technicians, that kind of thing. And then you roll up into, you know, what's more normal, again, where you have like the factory owners, you have the capitalists, you have all that. But it added a sizable functional middle class, and it absolutely empowered people's economic rights into a level where they demanded more social rights. I would absolutely advocate, and have before and still do, that it was the rise of capitalism and the middle class from the Industrial Revolution that really actually makes modern democracy work, or at least it did. And that having people that had more than just a pittance of a salary made them say, hey, I want more of a say in our governing affairs. I don't care if I'm not landed gentry. I should have a right to say what's going on here. And these are the people that largely will break open a lot of these institutions to be far more inclusive. Whether it was getting rid of the land permits to vote here in the United States, or eventually letting women vote, and vice versa, is that tearing down these barriers because people can participate more and more in society proved incredibly beneficial. But it also has some problems. Going full circle here, because now we're going to talk about like why this age could possibly end, is that liberalism relies on a very strong body politic. It relies on, just because you have people participating doesn't mean they're going to participate to a strong level, right? And I'm going to, hit on people here a little bit. Just because you can vote doesn't mean that you're going to be a contributing member of society. One of the biggest reasons I have issues with progressives is that I think most of them that I know want to take from others to benefit themselves. It's the, hey, I don't really want to work. I want UBI. I want, I want education. I want healthcare, and I want all this, and I don't want to have to leave the comforts of my own house. I know a lot of people will say that's a straw man, but that's how I generally look at many progressives, is that they want the semblance of a strong society without actually having to do anything for it. But this also socially too, and this is actually one of the big reasons why I reject liberalism in a nutshell, is that just because you have the right to participate doesn't mean that you will or do it effectively. And I'm going to put a punch on the right here now, is that just because you can read and write and actually participate and listen to information doesn't mean you get good information. Does not mean that you actually are equipped to handle that information. And looking at a lot of these election rig people, the people that claim that the election was rigged, that Trump absolutely won it, all this bullshit, these people have no fucking idea what they're talking about. They are absolutely clinically insane. Technically, that's a little bit facetious. I apologize, but here's the thing. This is not reality. This is not what happened. And you have probably somewhere on the order of 40 million Americans that believe that is the case. And if you have a body politic that does not strive to actually have the tools to make this work, then yeah, it's not going to, or it's going to falter. It's going to break down. Now, a lot of this, for what people complain about right now, is that this is the fourth turning. This is when weak men breed weak times. Is that the boomers were raised in an era of privilege and an era of, incredible wealth and freedom, and they have failed to maintain what their forefathers built for them, like the Great Generation, because they didn't have to go through the pains of the Great Depression and a world war to figure out how everything works and what sacrifices need to be made to have, they have not figured out what it took to maintain a strong and functional society. And without that, it doesn't maintain itself. You always eventually get into this era where it's the old cycle, right? Strong men make weak times. Weak times make weak men. Weak men make. It's not bad time. It's bad times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men, and weak men make bad times. And I'm a firm believer that this is absolutely the case, and we're just in that weak men make bad times situation. Our forefathers or if you will, our grandparents, the boomers, are a pittance compared to what came before them. The silents were better than them, and particularly the Great Generation was better than them. I'm not a big fan of the boomers in that general regard. Is that while some of them had their own adversities, they are nothing compared to having to go to war and lost 400,000 of their own countrymen. Now I'm sure somebody's going to be like, oh, Vietnam, or this Cold War. Look at the people who ran the show versus the people who came up in it. We're talking Reagan. We're talking Kennedy's. We're talking Bush. We're talking not Clinton, excuse me. We're talking about the people who were originally grew up in the war, fought in the war, understood what happens versus the people who came later, particularly Clinton and Bush Jr., right? Completely different methods of operating, which is not a bad thing, but they're so more milquetoast about everything. They don't understand that there's lines in the sand that you have to draw before you have a society that starts going off their complete rails. And that's why you had such a great era of peace and prosperity under, or one of the reasons why you have such an era of great peace and prosperity under the boomers. Not under the boomers, but under the Great Generation, is that even though they would do some fuck shit, is that they knew when they get their hands dirty and why you had to do it. And while I don't agree with every single thing that they did, the long and the short here, at least for me personally, is that I have a fundamental, I have a very strong I had to fix my mod station. I apologize for that. I have a strong affinity for the people who really have to go through some crap before they get everything working in order. And I just seem to notice that the people who don't have to actually really suffer in a major way are very much a pittance. So I am very much in favor of I'm sorry, I got distracted. I had to go through my chat real quick there on Twitch because I had to shut that conversation down. That was getting ridiculous. You can see it there on the sidebar if you were watching. But I don't really need an Israel-Palestine conversation in my chat right now. So anyway, let's ignore that for a moment. And here's the problem, in a nutshell. I do believe that things are going to get better. I think the millennials are going to have to cut their teeth. They're going to be the next great generation because they're going to have to be, or otherwise their society falls apart. And I don't think Americans and millennials and all this crap are these little whiners that don't want to work. Every generation has people that don't want to work, that don't want to participate, that don't want to be involved. And every generation has people that really want to cut their teeth, can go out and you literally make the world turn by storm. I'm not worried about the millennials. Now, granted, I am one and maybe I'm biased, but, I'll let you handle that what it is. I know many, many good millennials. I mean, any trash millennials. I know that of every generation. I don't see the millennials as particularly indifferent or special on either way. I don't think that they're these lost souls that are all screwed up. I think they have some problems, sure. But I don't believe that we're going to end the age. I think there's some trends here that are becoming apparent that are scary. So let's talk about trend number one. Trend number one is that we talked about this in the Industrial Revolutions conversation. So please definitely go check out that episode if you haven't watched that, whether you're watching it on here, on YouTube, on Twitch, or on listening on the podcast. Be sure, wind that thing back a bit and go look at the other episodes that we've done because it's important. You need context. And so the first thing is that the third industrial revolution completely destroyed a lot of the benefits of the second industrial revolution. Is that instead of having this technocratic class of skilled machinists and maintenance workers, we've replaced it with service-based economies, which are largely barbers and people that, they can make a decent living as a server, but more often than not, you're living in what we would largely call poverty or close to it. Or you have highly skilled, highly technical people who do these services, such as doctors, such as teachers, more professors, but I decide. Lawyers, that kind of thing. Things that you always need people to have those services for and that require a significant amount of education to get there. That fundamentally changed it because in a service-based economy, there is very little of a middle class. Some people talk about trades workers, such as plumbers and electricians, who used to be middle-class workers, but they're not anymore. They've actually ascended into the what we would largely call the upper class. The average plumber now makes $60K a year. One, because a lot of millennials were told not to be a plumber or an electrician, and so those skills are now in an exuberant amount of demand. Carpentry is going through the roof now too. There's just not enough people to do these jobs because no one wants to do them. But even if they did, is that these are highly skilled service jobs that do require quite a bit of knowledge. Just, looking at it and watching on YouTube is one thing, but, being able to build a home is not something that you just throw a few nails and boards together and call it a day. You have to know how to hang drywall. You have to know how to lay flooring. You have to know how to basically cut wood at certain angles to actually make it shape into the things that you want to be. You guys can see the woodwork all behind me, right? Is that all of these things, whether that baseboard down there, which really needs cleaned, by the way. Hell, you can see that on camera. Whether it's the baseboard down there, the window itself, the curtains, what have you, these all take skills to put together. You have to know how to actually put them together, what's going to be aesthetically pleasing, what is actually needed, the difference between a baseboard, and then how to hang the drywall, and then how to put the window in the frame, and then, all that. I don't even know what I'm talking about, right? You need to know this to build a house. And some of it isn't super complicated. A lot of it's just hard work, but some other things of it are. Figuring out how to fit all of this stuff and do 900 square feet requires quite a bit of math. Sorry, that's my house. It's like 960. So, yeah, skills. with that is that we're getting back into an era that is far more gentrified. Is that you tend to be of this elite class that actually is either incredibly hardworking or incredibly skilled, and you pass out on your kids, but there's no in-between point that you can kind of build up from or just crash into if you fail. And so if you fail and you crash out, you become a very basic in-service worker. You're working as a teller. You're working as a cashier. You're working as a guy who's doing, basic retail. It sucks. And you can't build yourself back up from that, or particularly if you're in that, it's really hard to move up into that skilled class because it requires an enormous amount of investment, both in education and your personal time. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. Hard to do. So that's start one, is that the economic conditions have actually made it far more familiar with what we saw before the Industrial Revolution than what we saw during it. And that concerns me a lot because that whole economic rights part is faltering. People are having a harder time putting food on the table, getting their kids to school, any and all of that. Poverty's increasing. Wealth is becoming harder to get. And if that continues, people won't have the economic benefits and the economic ability to look after their social rights. So it only takes, a couple of guys who just say, you know what, I'm okay if these people don't vote, or I'm okay if these people can't protest, or I'm okay if the police just want to beat your head in. That's all it takes. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort to maintain a functioning society. And if you have people who can't show up because they're working 60 hours a week, that spells disaster, just on its own merit. So that's number one. Here's number two. Number two is actually the internet. And at first, a lot of people thought that the internet was going to be the bastion to save the world, right? It was going to open up new dialogue and new courses and discussion. And so you have like Arab Spring, which is basically this, this popular uprising because people were upset and they got on the internet and they all networked and they all figured out they were going to have these massive protests. Two problems. Number one, it wasn't that massive. It was actually an instigated coup by the Egyptian military. If we're talking about Egypt itself. And a lot of these were just kind of put under the sun. But what really is the concerning part here is that back during the day, when most people either didn't have access to the internet or when everybody was, there wasn't a lot of safeguards. The FBI wasn't constantly monitoring the internet. There wasn't shut-off switches that actually shut off entire sections of the internet or cut your access off to it. Now there is. Now you have every intelligence agency in the world uses the internet as the primary method of gaining personal intelligence on people. Because you can look at the diplomat's Facebook profile or Twitter profile, and you can watch everything that they post, everything that they say, every statement that they give. It's usually on there. Or on a video, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. So much personal information is out there, and it's so easy to make inferences. Like there's people who literally can look at the sun, and if they know what time of day it is, they can tell you almost exactly where you live. It's ridiculous. And so, on the whole general level here, is that the internet is become a problem, and that it is now a great asset for authoritarians. It gives them everything they need to know to fuck up your life. Pardon me for the language, but I'm not doing well with the filter today. Keep that in mind. Is that now the people, the institution that people thought was going to open up more doors for freedom because it enabled communication is actually the thing that's now enabling people to be most effectively repressed and put in a box. Because, I'm not going to rant on this too much, but cancel culture. Cancel culture is nothing new. We've seen this for years and years and years. But when people can pull up a post that you made months ago, weeks ago, years ago, a decade ago, and be like, "Oh, this person's a piece of crap. We shouldn't deal with them." There is no forgiveness in the court of public opinion. There is no resiliency. There is no jurisprudence. The courts can actively say, IRL, if you've committed a crime, you've served your time. And be like, hey, look, you're no longer, subject to being thrown in jail for this particular crime. We have double jeopardy laws. we have double jeopardy. Can't do that. You don't have this in the court of public opinion. You don't have this in social fags. And so even the societies themselves are tending more authoritarian. A lot of people are closing out a lot of abilities for people to make amends in their lives. Because I made a post about 2 months ago that has come back to hit me just today, where I said something that was wrong, and that it wasn't that it wasn't that I'm just like, oh, I said this horrible thing. It was what I meant to say and how it was taken was completely off. And a part of it's me like, all right, I goofed up my terminology, right? But I just had people ask me about the post today because somebody had taken a picture of it. And I had made a redaction. And I said, hey, look, this is not what I meant. I apologize for that. But no one cares. No one gives a crap about the apology. They just care about being offended. And when everyone's worried about being offended, and everyone's worried about policing the social mores versus actually making redemptions and becoming or returning to like the acceptance of the society proper, is that sooner or later, there's no saints anymore. There's no good people to look up to. And so what you have to do is you put everyone in a box. You say, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. This is incredibly an authoritarian structure in its making. And the worst part is governments don't even have to do anything. They can, and they are. But I haven't even touched that. It's just the people are doing this to themselves. They're crimping down on their own freedoms in the name of morality and social justice. And so, on a general level there, I'm very concerned with that. The problem with governments is that if they decide that they want to go after you, they can do that very, very easily. I'm not going to say this was a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, but the people who stormed the United States Capitol, if that had happened in 1980, most of those people would have gone back home, and it never would have, people would have not even noticed. No kidding. Like people would have known about it, people would have freaked out, but you would have never been able to catch 95% of these people because there's no way to track them. Or at least there's very few ways. First, you need photos of who the people are. Many of them were wearing masks, whether it be COVID or because they're starting a shitstorm. So you wouldn't have known who they were. Many of them would have been inferenced. It would have been a lot of investigative work for the FBI and police detectives to figure out who was there, why they were there, did they do anything wrong, did they commit a crime. And there would have been something like 100 people tops that would have been arrested for that. Tops. We've had over 1,000 people arrested and charged to this day because of what happened on January 6th and the storming of the United States Capitol. And most of that is because of the internet. Most of that is from the technological suite that is largely in your pocket. A lot of it was, oh, hey, this person was confirmed was in the Capitol building because of GPS and location services based on Google on your Android or Apple phone. I don't want to sound like crazed here, and I'm not, or at least I shouldn't sound crazed, but for the whole general level here is Big Brother's real. It's here. It's not something that we dream up. The NSA will listen to every single phone call that you have. And it's not that they care. Most of the time, it's a computer listening onto it, and it's looking for a few keywords. And if it finds those keywords, then it'll flag it, and it'll send it off to an administrator where they'll listen in on your conversation. But on the general level here is that when I'm talking to you right now, there are official authorities, whether it be American or otherwise, that are watching this show just to see if I am going to give off red flags about what my intentions are. Because I can say this, and hello for the FBI agent that's going to watch this episode. I can say, I am going to go shoot up all of these people. Congratulations. I literally just red flag myself. That's gonna come across somebody's desk in a couple hours. And they're going to be like, all right, is this guy actually serious? Was this hyperbole? What have you? Sometimes the computers can do this themselves. But the whole general level here, that's not conspiracy. We know that they do this at Fort Meade. This is nothing that, it's not Alex Jones. We have the documents. It's real. It's very real. We've been doing this since the 70s. Largely, it was tapping your telephones. But now, because of the Patriot Act and all this, is that it's completely legal to basically traffic anything that comes through an ISP. Because, yeah, it's illegal to tap in your house, but it's not illegal to tap the ISP. It's not illegal to tap the business of Google or Apple or, Android services. And they can, and they do. And so the whole level here is that everything that... I'm sorry, not everything. A lot of things that I'm looking at that kind of enabled the age of liberalism is largely either gone away under the economic conditions or is actually being taken a hammer to under the social conditions because the ideology of advancing the average person isn't quite there anymore. Say what you will about liberals and conservatives and progressives and all these people saying that they want to empower the individual. They really don't. There's not a lot of that. A lot of this is groupthink. There's not a lot of people going against the grain. And when they do get against the grain, they either seemingly just, are about to walk into retirement or they seemingly are forced into retirement. See anyone who spoke out against Donald Trump and the Republican Party recently. Or if you say anything horrible on the left or that's out of the grain, you get canceled. Some of these things I do like. I'm not going to lie. Some of these things I do appreciate where it's just like, no. We don't appreciate this. You're put in timeout. Reciprocity is okay. But jurisprudence is needed here too. There needs to be a point where people go, all right, look, you said that thing, you serve your time in the box. Welcome to the society. You haven't done anything for a while. And just kind of as another personal anecdote here. There was a guy, Socked on Left, that's what his username is, was saying some screwed shit in Discord DMs and posts 2 years ago. Well, somehow these come back out. Or just came all out at one time very recently. And people were like, oh, well, we have to cancel him. Oh, this is terrible, whatever. I don't like Socked on Left. But I had not seen, heard, or had any evidence to the fact that any of these posts, any of these things that he has done, has been done within the last year. Or maybe even the last 18 months. And why does that matter? Okay? It's one thing to actually see that somebody has a history of doing that. I don't dissuade from that. But on the other side of this, that's really important, is that if your whole thing is to infect conformity, or if you will more, infect a certain line in the sand where people can't cross, and people are on the correct side of this, and you don't have any evidence of it for a while, shut the fuck up. Let it roll. Okay, he did this then. Socked on Left's, like an angsty, I think he's like 19. Okay, so back then he would have been like 17. Okay, angsty 17-year-old teenager. I was that once. I said screwed up shit. Are you still going to cancel me at 29 for that? Like, some people will. And that's screwed up. But anyway, just to kind of let this go full circle for anyone who wants to know, you can clip this and ship this. I actively defended the FCL is fine. You know what? I see absolutely no reason to cancel him. I don't see any evidence that he's been trolling people or screwing with people or what have you, and in recent memory. And if somebody has a thing here, whatever, definitely send it to me. I'll revise. But, there's a level here where I just go, if it's consistent and you're still doing it, it's one thing. If it's something that you were doing for a while and you dropped it and you became, more upstanding, what have you, that's encouraged. We want that. Keep that. Yes. Don't cancel the poor dude. So that's kind of my rant into the void on a general level. Chat, if you guys have any questions for me on this one, feel free to throw it out there. I'll happily take it for the moment. It's just on a whole level here. I don't like what I'm seeing. And I definitely see a lot of levels to where the age of liberalism can go to hell in a handbasket. Look at what's going on in Europe. Economic decline, social decline. You're having a lot of these institutions are kind of wearing out because the systems aren't built for what's going on. Demographic inversion, where there's more old people than there are young people. Societies aren't built to have that. We talked about that in the demographics episode. Go check that out. All of these things are problems, and I'm not to say that we can't get through them. But when the impetus is heading in the opposite direction, where people don't have the economic well-being to keep people, when people don't have the economic impetus to keep this going, then, yeah, I'm sorry, I've been looking at chat here. When people don't have the economic or impetus and well-being to keep this thing going, that's not going to work very well. And then if they don't have the social impetus to keep this thing going, it's not going to work very well. And I'm not seeing a lot that's actually reaffirming my commitment that people are actually advocating for the age of liberalism. Now, as a personally, I do reject liberalism as an ideology. I think it has serious problems, in that it does not currently reflect a society that I'll put it this way. I have no problem with the idea of advancing people's rights. I have no problem with advancing the ideas that people should be more involved in their society and what's going on. What I do have a problem with is that to have nice things, you have to have costs, right? To have people participate in a society, they have to know things. They have to be, you can't just listen to anyone on the internet. As much as I love what you guys do for me, but I like to show that I have some level of expertise, whether I'm studying in economics and political science, which you guys care about, or that I've demonstrated that I have informational material that other people do not, that makes me understand the world in a way that you guys do not. I have to demonstrate expertise. And right now the problem is that we don't do that. A lot of people are just like, oh, they want to hear people bitch on the internet, whether it's on ESPN, whether it's on CNN, what have you, is that we keep hearing people who have absolutely no credentials in anything keep talking. And as long as that's a thing, that scares me. And that I reject that part of liberalism. Just because you are a member of the society does not mean that you have, and you should be innately listened to. You need to demonstrate that you are cut above the rest. Because if I'm going to be human, I guess, here again, or anti-populist here, is that the average person doesn't know jack. The average person is busy taking care of their kids, making sure the family gets to soccer practice, making sure the bills are paid, that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean that if the replacement for the M1 Abrams tank should have 4 crew members, 3 crew members, or 2 crew members. It doesn't mean that you understand the intricacies of putting a tariff against China, whether it's actually going to hurt the American civilian or whether it isn't. Did you do the math? Do you understand the math? A lot of these things are important. A lot of things are necessary, but the average person does no context to understanding them. The average person has no ability to actually grasp what these things mean. I can make it a talking point. I can be like, tariffs hurt people. And to some degree, I can absolutely make that by inference. People will believe that. But there's the big question on, does it hurt everyone? Does it hurt most people? Does it hurt younger people? Who does it hurt? How much? There's a constant conversation that needs to be had about that, and the average person is nowhere equipped for that. And it's not that I don't want to gatekeep people out of just being involved in conversations writ large, but there's barriers to entry that needs to be had there, and liberalism is the abjection of that. I'm sorry, it's the rejection of that. The abject rejection of that is that everyone should participate and everyone should be involved. Or at least I think steelmaning liberalism to the point where that is the penultimate goal. I don't have a problem with that on a nutshell. I'm a strong individualist. I'm a rugged individualist. But it doesn't mean that you just give everyone the time and place to say anything and everything that they want just because they exist. And so that's kind of my rejection of it. And that's something that concerns me going down the line. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I think that pretty much closes it out. I don't have anything else to add. And chat's being weird today, so I'm just going to address that in the after show. I want to thank you all very much for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Be sure to check this out on YouTube and listen to this on the podcast. We appreciate the listens and follows. Do me a favor, and if you do enjoy this show, make a post, share it, tag it, equip it. Let people know I'm out there, because I know there's a lot of people that really enjoy what I talk about. Sometimes they're not a fan of me, and sometimes they think I'm full of horse crap. But there's a lot of people that do want to hear what I have to say, and I know there's a lot of people that really enjoy what I want. So if you enjoy what I like, and you think that somebody else might be enjoyed as well, give it a share, give it a post, give it a like, whatever it is. I'd appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much, everyone. You can catch me on YouTube. You can catch me on Twitter. You can catch me on LinkedIn, Facebook, all those things. Contact me. We'll see you next time.